Hey, and welcome to On the Go with Teresa and Andy. Today's video is a look at our 6-day vacation to Maine. We flew to Manchester, New Hampshire, and we spent 2 days sightseeing on our way up to Bar Harbor. We spent 3 full days in Bar Harbor, and then we drove back to Manchester to catch a flight home. This is only our second vacation video, but we're hoping to do more, so like and subscribe. I hope this information helps if you're planning a trip to Maine. And anyway, here we go. We landed in Manchester, New Hampshire, and drove straight to York, Maine. And I found a lobster restaurant right on the coast called Lobster Cove. My idea was to get the first lobster roll we could find, and the lobster roll was okay, but the view was pretty impressive. After a quick bite, we took in the rocky beauty of the Maine coast, for the first time almost, and headed north a few miles to Cape Nettic Lighthouse. This lighthouse is inaccessible to the general public most of the time, but about 100 yards away is Sauchier Park, and that has this great view. You can see the lighthouse through the ocean and waves on this rock. Our next stop was a short drive north again. It was to Algonquin, and this town name literally translates to beautiful place by the sea. This seems pretty fitting. In Algonquin, we walked the marginal way. It's named the margin because it's the margin between the land and the sea. It's a pretty stunning cliff walk, and it's about 1.25 miles stroll from Perkins Cove to Spar Hark. It's full of beautiful ocean front mansions, some quiet park benches where people sit, watch the waves, relax to the sound of the surf. The next thing we did was we drove through Portland to the Portland Head Lighthouse, which is a historic lighthouse in Cape Elizabeth, Maine. The lighthouse marks the entrance of a primary shipping channel into the Portland Harbor. It was completed in 1791, and it's the oldest lighthouse in Maine. The light station is automated, and the tower, beacon, and foghorn are all maintained by the U.S. Coast Guard. The former lighthouse keeper's house is now a maritime museum within Fort Williams Park, which is right there. Portland Head Lighthouse is situated along spectacular shores, and it's become a popular landmark owned and managed by the town of Cape Elizabeth. The lighthouse is actually only open to the public 1 day a year, and it's National Maine Lighthouse Day.
Pirate ship straight ahead.
Our last stop after a busy day was dinner at the Terresa, I hope I pronounced that right, Lunch and Lobster Company in Freeport, Maine. It's a pretty typical lobster pound. It's right on a marina. It offers a variety of seafood options. We got the whole belly clams, which is a New England specialty. At the end of the day, we checked into a hotel in Brunswick and rested up for the next day. Brunswick itself has a cool, hip Main Street area with lots of independent shops, international restaurants. We started our morning out at Little Dog's Coffee, which was a hip spot I'd seen recommended online. It had nice outdoor seating and some pretty good coffee, breakfast options. Afterwards, we spotted a farmer's market just a few blocks away, so we looked around a couple dozen stands. They were selling coffee, beer, pre-cooked food, fruit, meat, vegetables, plants, and even live rabbits, hopefully as pets. Next, we drove through the town of Bath, which is also a pretty typical Maine town. It had a nice downtown area as well and some pretty cool Victorian houses. Maine itself has about 65 lighthouses, and many are open to the public. Some even offer access to keepers' quarters. A number have adjacent museums. We could only see a couple, and we generally picked lighthouses that were, both on our way and sort of unique and photogenic. A few miles down this dirt road through the woods, we reached Doubling Point Lighthouse. Doubling Point Light was built in 1898 in the Kennebunk River, Maine. It's one of 4 lighthouses built that year to provide navigational aid for ships on their way to Bath, which is the city of ships. Next, just a few miles away, we visited Squirrel Point Lighthouse. This was also located down a quiet dirt road, and it was about an easy mile and a half hike through the woods. The lighthouse was built in 1898 to aid in the navigation of the Kennebunk River. The station includes a tower, keeper's house, barn, boathouse, and an oil house. The Squirrel Point Lighthouse itself has an octagonal wood frame structure, with the lantern house topped by a ventilator and surrounded by an iron railing and a wooden bracketed galley. A gabled sound signal chamber is attached to one side, and the keeper's house is a two-story wood frame structure with a cross gable roof. As we made our way up the coast of Maine, we stopped in Boothbay Harbor, which is a small town on a peninsula that juts out into the Gulf of Maine. It's supposed to be one of the nicer spots along the Maine coast. Barrett Park overlooks the Lewis Bay. There's also several marinas, which are pretty typical of these towns in Maine, and the area's been a fishing center for decades, and it's known as a friendly harbor, which means during times of bad weather, ships can dock safely, wait out the storms. So a short drive away, we were in Wiscasset, and we went to Red's Eats. So this is a lobster shack, and it's one of the most famous places in Maine. It specializes in the lobster roll with either mayo or butter. We've heard it called Connecticut style or Maine style, depending on what you get. There are some pretty crazy lines that wrap around the block, especially during heavy tourist season. And we got there around 2 on a Friday, and we spent about 2 hours in line. However, it's all kind of part of the experience. We had a fun time. The staff at Red's were even handing out umbrellas for shade. So once we got our lobster rolls and fries, we agreed that this was, without a doubt, our best meal so far, and it was totally worth the hype. So bellies full, we headed on up to Camden, Maine, to get a view from Mount Batty. It has a spectacular view of the Sherman Cove and the Northeast Passage. Batty Tower was built in 1921 by summer residents, and it was built on the same ground as an old social club that used to overlook the Northeast Passage. Now it's the end point of a pretty popular hike. So we finished our photo op, and we headed down the mountain to Camden, Maine for one of Maine's other well-known treats. And we sat by the marina on the Manganiti-Cook River, and we ate our dessert. We sat near a waterfall, looked around at some lobster traps, just took a short walk around the marina and got ready for our hour and 45-minute drive to Bar Harbor. We stayed at the Cromwell Harbor Motel, which was kind of a nice local-run hotel, just a short walk into town and good location near Arcadia National Park. We started off at a coffee shop called Choco Latte, which we saw great reviews for. It's a Mexican-inspired cafe, which really was so excellent we had breakfast there every day. One day we even went back for tacos for lunch, and they were pretty excellent as well. So after we got our coffee, we went on to Acadia National Park. A good starting point if you're going to tour Acadia is the Park Loop Drive, which circles most of the island portion of Mount Desert Isle and has a quick access to a lot of the popular hikes and landmarks and things that are, mostly photographed. The first stop was Sand Beach, and this is a unique spot in Acadia because it's like the only sandy beach, which is pretty rare when you get that far north on the eastern coast. And supposedly it gets pretty busy with people actually swimming in the icy water in the summer, and there's a ton of people sunbathing. It's also like a starting point for a bunch of the more famous hikes in Acadia. The trails kind of start there, and there's a lot of parking. So onward down Park Loop Drive, we found Thunder Hole, and this is a pretty popular spot to witness as well. You see the power of the ocean tides. Ancient geological forces kind of carved this granite feature, as well as most of the rocky coast that's in Acadia. Depending on the weather and the tides, the ocean spray can reach 40 feet. Most people visit with hopes of hearing the thunderous roar of the waves crashing into the granite caverns. and the rocky cliffs. I guess we got a little of that. I'm not sure if we heard the best, but so Jordan Pond was our next stop, and this is one of the park's most pristine lakes. It's got outstanding mountain scenery. In the distance, you can see Bubble and South Bubble rocks. But anyway, glaciers carved out the landscape, and it left behind a bunch of these features. The pond itself is about 150 feet deep, and it spans 187 acres. So it's the deepest and the second longest lake in Acadia. We hiked the Jordan Pond path, which, was just a easy trail that kind of follows the shore of Jordan Pond. The trail took about an hour and a half and was about 3.5 miles long. Interesting enough, it provides drinking water for a lot of the area, so there's no swimming in it. And after our hike, we headed back into town, and we went along the Bar Harbor Shore Path. It's more than a century old. It's 1.5 miles out and back, and it's got some of the more iconic views of Freshman Bay. And you also see Balance Rock, which is a unbalanced boulder that exists from the last ice age. So we just got done hiking the Jordan Pond, and now we're taking the Bar Harbor Shore Path to Stewart's Lobster Pound to hopefully try one of our first whole lobsters on a lobster dinner. So
yeah, it'll be my very first whole lobster. I've had lobster tails.
The trail ends in Agmont Park, which is the center of Bar Harbor, and it's got some dreamy views of the harbor itself, the Narrows. We chose Duman's Lobster Pound. We chose it mostly for the views, but in the end, the clam chowder, the whole lobster dinner were pretty good. Yeah, so this is about to go down. Wish me luck. The Maine berry pie, which is a local favorite, was also really good. It's made from wild Maine berries, which are basically sweet little wild blueberry.
It's really sweet.
Really?
Tastes like candy almost.
On our way back to the hotel, we stopped at Project Social, which was another sort of hipster cocktail and tapas spot. We sat outside, we listened to some music, had some pretty good cocktails. The next morning, once again after our coffee, we saw this farmer's market, and we couldn't resist people watching and seeing what they had to offer. Typical farmer's market, people were selling produce, meat, coffee. There's maple syrup, and there's a couple live seafood vendors. One of them even showed us a stone crab. We're from Maryland, so it was interesting to see a different type of crab, I guess.
But most of the meat is in the claws, and it's really good.
So after that stop, we went up to Cadillac Mountain. So this morning, we got our reservations to go up on Cadillac Mountain. So we're going up to see the view from Cadillac Mountain and Mount Desert Isle. The drive up to Cadillac Mountain in general gave us some pretty cool views of Jordan Pond and Eagle Lake. And we saw Otter Cliffs and Mount Desert Narrows, sort of, all from the winding road up. Cadillac Mountain's over 1,500 feet. It's the tallest mountain on the eastern seaboard of the United States. It's also the first place that you can see the sunrise in the U.S. So we were fortunate to see a vulture taking in the views of Freshman Bay as well. And it looked out from its lofty peak on this tree. On a clear day, it's possible to see Mount Katahdin, which is Maine's highest mountain, to the north, and you can even see the Canadian province of Nova Scotia to the east. Both of those are over 100 miles away. Our next stop was a short hike up to Bubble Rocks. The unique formation was created tens of thousands of years ago by glacial erosion. Bubble Rocks is perched precariously on the edge of a cliff, overlooking the South Bubble summit, but it seems impossible to tip it over. Geologists have estimated that the rock originated 40 miles to the north of Lucerne. Back in Bar Harbor, we stopped to see the Mount Desert Narrows Bar Island land bridge, which is completely underwater during high tide. For dinner, we went to the chart room and ate on a deck overlooking Hall's Cove and watched the sunset. We enjoyed the local oysters and the lobster. The next day, we crossed the Somme Sound to the next peninsula and into Southwest Harbor. We were early for our lobster boat tour, so we made a quick stop at the Bass Harbor Lighthouse on the southern tip. Through the foggy morning air, we saw one of the most photographed lighthouses in Acadia. The bell tower marks the entrance of Bass Harbor and Blue Hill Bay, and it was built in the 1850s. So we've had a busy couple of days, and I think we're starting to feel a little weary, but we're going to take a lobster tour out of the Southwest Harbor, which is the next peninsula over from Mount Desert Isle. It's a little rainy, a little chilly, but hopefully it should be some good fun, and we'll see you on the boat. We met our lobster boat guide Jason with Acadia Lobster Cruise in Southwest Harbor. As we rode out to sea, Jason shared a wealth of knowledge with us. Everything from lobster regulations to local geography, to marine life, Maine culture, and even moose hunting permits.
In the body.
He was a great storyteller who seemed to know everyone in the area. We saw several harbor seals, which are new to the area, and were very active due to the large number of herring. We watched as he pulled up each of his lobster traps, checking for lobsters. He'd measure them and check their sacks to see if we could eat them or throw them back.
I call that the hunger syndrome. We're like, this has to be big enough that are big enough.
His traps caught lobster, crab, a sea cucumber, and some other critters. We got to see them up close, practice our measuring skills, and get some photo ops. Then we chose an executioner. We saw some more seals and heard some more lobstering stories, and 20 minutes later, we had the freshest lobster you could imagine. Our last day in Maine was mostly a 5-hour drive back to the airport, but along the way, we stopped by Rockport, Maine, to see the Rockport Marine Park and the famous Andre the Seal statue. It was a nice little park with a scenic view of the marina. The statue itself is in honor of Andre, who was a harbor pup who was adopted in the 1960s. He developed a 25-year bond with his companion. It's well documented in books and in the 1994 feature, Andre.
Who's a good boy? Who's a good boy?
Our last stop was Sprague's Lobster House. This is in Wiscasset, Maine, right across the street from the more famous Red's, where we stopped a few days earlier. It has a nice large deck overlooking the Sheepscot River. The Lobster Shack serves clam, fish, chicken, and of course lobster. Here we go. It was a very nice sunny day out, and we ate it at picnic tables under umbrellas. Afterwards, we had ice cream. Overall, we thought Sprague's was pretty identical in terms of food quality to Red's. The line was about 15 to 20 minutes, so much quicker, and Red's wasn't open on this day anyway. So I imagine a much shorter wait if Red's had been open. So we think that Sprague's is almost as good as Red's Eats. They don't seem to have quite as good a butter. I don't think they're using Kate's butter. They're a couple dollars cheaper, and the meat seems pretty identical.
Yeah.
The wait was about 45 to 50 minutes. Red's for us was about 2 hours. So
Although when Red's was open, there was no wait open at Sprague's.
yeah, correct. Yes, there was no one at all in line at Sprague's. So if we came back, I think we would probably choose Sprague's, right?
Yeah. The fries were better at Reddy's too, but only because they were salted.
Yeah.
These weren't salted.
Yeah, we could have used more salt in the fries, and they had some really good bottled drinks here that were.
Yeah, the
Sprague's.
drinks were way better at Sprague's.
But anyway, that's the end of our vacation. So we are about to get in the car, and we got about a 2.5 hour ride to the airport. If you like this video, you could like, share, subscribe, whatever. We don't post too many, but hopefully we'll be back around. And otherwise, we'll see you on our next adventure. Bye.
big ones. A lot more of these. But trust me on this. It's gonna be fun.
Can I see your measuring tool?
Yeah.
You don't trust him?
Well, no. It's funny you say that
I like
because
hands on.
yeah. Sometimes that beals. Sometimes that beals. They'll go fast.
Oh, this is a male.
What are we working with here? This guy's very calm.
Like, don't you want to know?
Oh, we got a male.